Welcome to Photography Basics at New Lenox Library. This presentation was put together by Jane Frederick, and the narration is by Ashley Middleton. Jane and I both work in the Digital Media Lab here at New Lenox Library. Today we're going to talk about light and composition. Photography literally translates as light drawing. Light is one of the most basic elements of photography. Understanding its natural qualities is essential in creating great photographs. The sun is our daily source of light, but in our lives we have other artificial forms of light. Once you understand the basic principles of light, which we're going to present here, you can play with introducing artificial light sources and different kinds of sunlight and have fun with it. Here we're going to consider the sun's light and its impact on the appearance of our photograph subjects. High-key and low-key lighting refers to the lighting ratio in a photograph, so the contrast between the shadows or the darkest areas of an image and the highlights, which are the lightest areas of an image. High-key lighting is lower contrast. It's used to suggest a light and upbeat mood, so that is the picture that you see on the left. Cloudier days actually produce a higher key, which is softer lighting. You can consider clouds as nature's softbox, which is a device that's attached to the front of an artificial light source to redirect the light, which makes it softer and less harsh. So if you think of a flashlight, that's a pretty harsh light if you're shining it at somebody, but this would be some sort of semi-transparent fabric box that you put over that light source, which makes the light not quite so direct, not quite so harsh. Low-key lighting is a higher contrast. It's used to suggest a more dramatic mood. That's what you can see on the right here. Sunrise and sunset will give you really good low-key lighting. Backlighting, front lighting, and side lighting all refer to the position of the light in relation to your subject. So if you have your subject being a person, like they are in this photo, the backlighting positions the light behind your subject, and that creates a silhouette like you see on the far left. And this is great to show the outline of your subject, but it's undesirable if you want to show your subject's face, for instance. Front lighting positions the light or the sun in front of your subject face on. This illuminates your subject nicely, although it can be a bit flat, meaning there aren't distinct shadows or highlights to describe the form of the subject. That is the middle photograph. So in this photograph, the photographer would have their back to a window, for example, and the subject would be facing them directly. Side lighting positions the light or sun at either side of the subject. So the light sort of breaks across your subject, visually describing its texture and form. So you can see on the far right that you have a lot of play of light and shadow, and the subject becomes more dynamic and has more depth to it. Reflectors bounce light back onto a subject, which creates illumination without having to have another light source. Anything light or shiny can be used as a reflector. So you don't need the reflectors that you see here or the reflectors that we have in the Digital Media Lab. You can use a piece of white cards or tinfoil. You should try mounting the card or the tinfoil onto a more sturdy surface before using it, like a piece of cardboard. Reflectors can illuminate shadows, which create a less contrasting image, meaning you're going to be able to see more detail. It gets rid of some shadows. If you are interested in playing around with the reflectors that you see here, they can be found online for very reasonable prices. Playing with light. You can try placing screens, windows, blinds, curtains, all sorts of different objects between your light source and your subject to create interesting patterns and colors. You can create your own screens by cutting shapes or patterns out of a piece of cardstock and placing it in between your light source, either the sun or a lamp, for example, to cast shadows onto your subject. I've even seen kitchen colanders used. Placing tracing paper and other semi-transparent plastics in front of your lens can also create beautiful softness and different colors. So those are your light basics. Now we're going to talk about composition. Composition is the placement and arrangement of your visual elements within the frame of your photograph. So whether they are people or objects, beloved pets, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can play with the placement and arrangement. Depth here refers to where the subjects sit in relation to your lens, your camera. Subjects closest to your lens are in what's called the foreground. Subjects farthest from your lens are in the background, and the subjects in between the two are considered to be the middle ground. So in these photographs, let's say the photo on the left, the flowers in front are in the foreground, the mountain is in the background, and the lake is in the middle ground. On the photograph on your right, you can see that the rocks closest to you and the shoreline, that's your foreground. The middle ground is most of the water and other rocks and objects. The sunset is in the background. Paying close attention to where objects sit in relation to one another in the frame can allow you to create a greater sense of depth in your images. Playing with depth of field, your aperture, can emphasize the distance in between subjects. Depending on what kind of camera you're using, it'll be easier to play with this depth of field. If anybody has depth of field questions, please comment and we will be happy to have Jane answer your questions. The rule of thirds is one of the most effective ways to draw attention to a subject in your photograph. Imagine your photograph is divided into 9 equal parts by the 4 lines shown. Placing your subject along one of these imaginary intersection lines, placing your subject along one of these imaginary lines or at the intersection of 2 lines draws your viewer's eye to your subject. If we consider the photograph itself as your initial frame, try looking for other objects to curl, curve, or draw around the main subject in your image. Examples include looking through windows, doors, plants, and other man-made objects. Paying close attention to the placement of this chosen object in relation to your lens can further emphasize depth in your image. Find objects that draw lines in your frame. I don't mean literally draw some lines within your frame, but rather find subjects with linear qualities. Consider how you would want your lines to appear in your photograph: horizontally, vertically, diagonally, or a mixture of all 3. Not all lines have to be straight. Consider how the vines on a plant may twist and turn around a lattice or another plant. Lines leading towards a subject can be used to focus the viewer's attention. Play with angles here too. Where you are in relation to a linear subject can change its appearance. Angles: above, below, and same level. Where we place ourselves in relation to our subject can really change our photographs. Try photographing the same subject from above, from below, from the same level, and from the side. What you will find is a dramatic difference in how your subject is portrayed. Apply this to portraiture. Get on the ground and photograph low when working with kids and babies. For more grown subjects, getting on their eye level is an option. To imply power, photograph a subject from below looking up to them. With the subject looking down on the viewer, they seem stronger and in control. Patterns, texture, and symmetry. Zooming in very close or out very far can emphasize the pattern and texture of a subject. Photographing a full parking lot from above, the vehicles become a smaller piece in a pattern. Photographing fruit up close, the viewer is focused on texture. Don't be afraid to get really close. Imagine photographing an orange and all you see is the texture of the orange peel. Suddenly we stop focusing on the shape of the orange and more on the texture and color of its peel. Turning a photograph to black and white can further emphasize textures and patterns, so we're not distracted by the colors of the subject. Rather, we focus on the forms of the subject. Symmetry, as shown on the left photograph here with the staircase, is when there is a balance between 2 sides of the picture. Symmetry can be found all over, in man-made objects or natural forms. Try blending the man-made with the natural and see the contrast between the 2. Don't forget, if you're taking pictures of people or animals, watch cutting off people's limbs and avoid objects sticking out from people's heads. It's more common than you think. If you have any additional questions, please be sure to leave us a comment and we will pass on your questions to Jane. Thanks everyone and take care.